"You're just in the way," they said, so I sold everything and left them with nothing. After everything I gave them, my time, my home, my trust, they looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're in our way now." I thought I misheard them. I didn't. That's the moment something inside me snapped. My name is Eleanor McBride, but most folks call me Ellie. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in the same house on Chestnut Avenue in Asheville, North Carolina for over 40 years, raised 2 kids there, buried my husband in the town cemetery, 5 minutes down the road. Built every inch of that home with love, sweat, and more sacrifices than I care to count. When Jack passed 10 years ago, I thought the hardest days were behind me. But I was wrong. The real betrayal didn't come from life. It came from family. It started when my son, Greg, and his wife, Chelsea, moved back in with me temporarily after Greg lost his job in Charlotte. They had 2 kids, Aiden and Lily, and I opened my arms and home without hesitation. I even remodeled the back room to give them their own space. Then my daughter, Rachel, who I thought would always be my lifeline, started acting distant, cold. She'd stop by less and less, and when she did, there was always some little jab about my age, my memory, the way I shouldn't be living alone. But it was one rainy Saturday morning that changed everything. I had just finished making pancakes when I overheard Greg and Chelsea talking in the hallway. "She's slowing down. She forgets things. She's in the way. We need space to build our life." Well, once the deed's in our name, we can talk about the remodel. The deed. My name was still on that deed. They hadn't asked. They just assumed I'd eventually fade into the wallpaper. I didn't say anything right away. I sat with it, let it burn quietly, let it carve something fierce into the walls of my chest. I raised Greg. I held his hand through every scraped knee and late-night stomach ache. And now he was plotting to erase me from my own home? But I wasn't ready to be erased. What they didn't know, what they never asked, was that after Jack died, I had quietly paid off the rest of the mortgage and tucked away the full property deed in my safe deposit box. Alone, with no shared access. Just my name, only mine. I'd been underestimated for too long. They forgot who this house really belonged to, and I was done being in the way. By the end of that week, I'd already made the call. The thing about living past 60 is, people stop seeing you. They see gray hair, a slower step, and they assume you're harmless. Done. Background noise. What they forget is that women like me have decades of practice staying quiet while doing everything. So I stayed quiet, but I moved. The first thing I did was visit the bank. My safe deposit box hadn't been opened in years, but there it was, just as I left it, the original deed notarized in my name alone. No joint ownership, no revisions, no room for confusion. Next, I walked across the street to the law office of Samuel Boone, my late husband's friend and as sharp as a tack. Real estate lawyer. He raised his eyebrows when I told him I wanted to sell the house. "Ellie, that's the place Jack built. You sure about this?" "They think I'm in their way, Sam. They want me gone, so I'll do just that and take the house with me." He let out a low whistle. "You're one cold glass of iced tea." I smiled. Not cold, just done. We set up everything privately, confidential listing, cash-only sale, expedited process. Sam pulled some strings to keep the paperwork quiet until the ink was dry. I didn't want Greg or Chelsea catching wind. Not yet. Back home, I continued playing the role. Doting grandma, slow-moving mom, harmless widow. Greg complained about the leaky faucet. I fixed it before he woke up. Chelsea left her dishes. I cleaned them without a word. But behind closed doors, I was emailing realtors and signing contracts. One night, Greg asked me why I hadn't renewed the home insurance yet. I told him I forgot. He sighed. "You really should let us take over. The finances, Mom, for your sake. I looked at him, dead in the eye, and smiled. Maybe you're right. He thought he won something that night. He didn't realize it was the calm before the storm. Rachel, meanwhile, hadn't visited in weeks. I wasn't surprised. I think she figured if Greg got the house, she'd inherit the savings. Either way, I'd become an afterthought in both of their stories. I was tired of being a chapter they skimmed through. 2 weeks later, the house was under offer. A family from Wilmington, young couple, pregnant with their second baby. When I met them privately with the realtor, I saw in their eyes what I hadn't seen in my own children in years: respect. They called me ma'am. They asked about the fireplace Jack installed with his bare hands. They cared. I accepted their offer. The closing date was set. 30 days. I started packing the attic first. The old photo albums, Jack's tool set, the quilt my mother stitched during the war. None of it would stay. One afternoon, while Greg was watching TV, I walked past him carrying a box of books. "What's all this?" he asked. "Just decluttering," I said. "You know how old folks get." He chuckled. "You're nesting for a retirement home already?" I laughed right back. Maybe I am. He never asked another question. Chelsea started rearranging the living room like it was already hers. She moved my antique chair into the basement and brought in some gaudy white couch she'd found on Facebook Marketplace. "They say white. Furniture makes the space feel more modern," she said, snapping photos for some home aesthetic blog she ran. I smiled and nodded. "You should enjoy it while you can." It went right over her head, but every moment added fuel to the fire. I wasn't just selling a house. I was reclaiming my dignity, one quiet step at a time. And soon, they'd know exactly who they'd been pushing out of the way. It was a Sunday morning, the kind Jack used to love, lazy, quiet, with coffee brewing and sunlight creeping in through the kitchen blinds. Greg and Chelsea were still asleep. The kids were glued to their tablets on the couch. I'd made my decision. Night before, I printed 2 letters, identical in content, different in tone. One for Greg, one for Rachel, tucked neatly into cream-colored envelopes, heavy paper, the kind you use when you're serious. Greg's envelope I placed on the kitchen table, right under the salt shaker. I knew he wouldn't miss it. Chelsea always made him eat breakfast first, before doing anything else. Rachel's I dropped off at her front porch on the way to the post. Then I waited. I went out for a walk, 4 miles. I let the mountain air clear my head and tried to keep my emotions flat, like water before a storm. My knees ached by the 3rd mile, but I kept walking. When I got back, Greg was sitting at the kitchen table, holding the letter like it had personally insulted him. Chelsea stood nearby, arms crossed, like she was trying to make sense of it, but couldn't. "You're selling the house?" Greg's voice cracked, not with sadness, but confusion. Offense. "Yes," I said calmly. "It's already under contract. Closing is in 3 weeks." "Are you kidding me?" he snapped. "We live here." I nodded. "And I never charged you rent. Not once. But we've built our life here, our kids. This is our home." "No, Greg. It's my home. You were a guest. And now it's time to move on." Chelsea's face flushed red. "You could have at least warned us, given us time." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked at them both and said, "You had time, months of it, while you were plotting to take the deed behind my back." Greg slammed his hand on the table. "You're doing this out of spite. Call it what you want, but I'm doing it with full legal right and full awareness." He scoffed. "And where will you go? What'll happen to you when you're alone and sick and regret this?" I smiled. "That's for me to find out. but I'd rather be alone with peace than surrounded by people who think I'm in their way. Then I walked into the living room and handed a manila envelope to Chelsea. Inside were the legal papers confirming the sale and notice to vacate. 30 days, no negotiation. She didn't say a word, just stared at me like she'd never really seen me before. Later that day, I got a call from Rachel. "You really sold it?" she asked, voice clipped. "Yes." "You didn't think maybe I deserved to know? I'm your daughter." I paused. "You stopped acting like one a long time ago." Silence. "Don't you want to leave something behind for us?" she said bitterly. "I am," I answered. "A lesson." She hung up. That evening, Greg and Chelsea barely looked at me. The kids, innocent as ever, asked if we were moving. I sat them down and told them I was going on a little adventure of my own. I hugged them close, wondering how much of their parents' entitlement would rub off over the years, but that wasn't my burden anymore. That night, I sat on the back porch with a cup of peppermint tea. The stars were out. The trees swayed. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of freedom. They thought I'd go down quietly. They thought I'd hand it all over and disappear. But the woman who built this house brick by brick was still here, and she had one final chapter to write, on her own terms. The next few days were a performance I didn't audition for. Greg turned on the charm. Suddenly he was waking up early to make coffee, asking how I slept, offering to run, errands I never asked for. Chelsea made a casserole and set the table like we were some kind of picture-perfect family from a Hallmark special. I wasn't fooled. They were scared. And nothing shows someone's true face like fear of losing what they think they're entitled. So Greg sat down across from me on the third evening after the notice. "Look, Mom," he began, "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we were too presumptuous." I tilted my head. "Presumptuous?" He cleared his throat. "Okay, maybe we just assumed that someday the house would be ours. I mean, Rachel doesn't have kids. You know we'd take care of it." "Take care of it, or take it over?" I asked calmly. His jaw clenched, but he forced a smile. "We love you. The kids love you. This has always been your home, but it's our home now, too. We can figure something out." "Greg," I said, folding my hands, "you told your wife I was in your way. You both discussed remodeling my house without once including me in the conversation. You took over the living room, the storage, the garage. You started treating me like an obstacle to your dreams." He looked down. "It wasn't like that." "Then how was it?" He didn't answer. Chelsea entered the room, holding her phone like it was a grenade. "The realtor just confirmed the buyers did the home inspection today. You didn't even tell us?" "Why would I?" I asked. "You're not on the deed." "But we live here." "For now." Her face turned crimson. "This is heartless." I looked her dead in the eye. "You taught me how to be heartless. Watching how you handled this place like a throne you didn't earn, that was my lesson. And now it's yours." Later that night, I got a message from Rachel. "Please don't do this. Greg's an idiot, yes, but we're still your family." I replied, "Family doesn't scheme behind your back and call you a burden." She didn't text again. But she did show up the next day. Her blazer still had the tag on it, probably bought just for this desperate performance. She brought flowers, a bakery pie. She even hugged me, stiffly, like a stranger trying to pass off a forgery. I should have called. "More," she said, sitting beside me in the sunroom. "I've just been busy with work and—" "You made time to talk about me," I interrupted, "just not to me." Her eyes watered. I wondered if it was real or another angle. "Do you hate us?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No. I just finally love myself more than the idea of keeping peace." That stunned her. I wasn't trying to wound her. I wasn't even angry anymore. I had simply outgrown them. In the following days, Greg started looking for apartments. Chelsea cried to her mom on the phone about being ambushed by an old woman. The irony wasn't lost on me. I booked a small cottage in the outskirts of Black Mountain. Cozy, single-story, and surrounded by evergreens. The moment I signed the lease, I felt decades lighter. At night, I walked barefoot across the hardwood floors of my nearly sold home, remembering every creak Jack left behind. And then I said goodbye. Not to the house, to the people I once thought I couldn't live without. The day the papers were signed, the sky was a perfect Carolina blue. Cloudless, calm, and just a little smug, like it knew this moment was mine. The buyers arrived first, Ashley and Ben, young, nervous, respectful. Ashley had brought homemade banana bread, which felt strange to receive from someone about to take over the home I'd lived in for most of my adult life, but sweet nonetheless. They were the kind of people who would water the azaleas without needing to be reminded. We met at Sam Boone's office just off Main Street. Sam had everything laid out in his no-nonsense style. Neat stacks, tabs, pens placed precisely at signing points. I looked across the table at the young couple. "You're getting a house full of stories," I told them, "and a porch that knows all my secrets." Ashley smiled. "We'll take care of it." "I know you will," I said. And I meant it. I signed. They signed. Sam stamped. And just like that, the house was no longer mine. It should have hurt. It didn't. Because I had already mourned what that house used to be. It was never about the walls or the roof. It was about who I'd been forced to become within them. A woman pushed aside in her own sanctuary, and now I was free. When I returned that afternoon, Greg was outside, arms crossed, pacing. He looked up when I parked the car and walked over, more defeated than angry this time. "So, that's it?" he asked. "You just gave it to strangers?" I didn't correct him, because I didn't give them anything. I sold it, clean, legal, final. "I gave it to people who didn't treat me like I was disposable," I replied. He scoffed. "This is unforgivable." "No, Greg," I said evenly. "What you did was unforgivable. This is justice." Chelsea stood on the porch, arms folded, watching us like a hawk circling roadkill. I looked past them both through the window, where my old quilt still rested on the couch. It was folded now, probably because the new couch cover clashed with it. I walked past Greg, opened the door, went straight to that quilt, and picked it up. "That goes with me." He didn't stop me. I stepped outside, quilt in hand, and paused one last time on the front steps. The place where Jack and I shared morning coffee, the spot where my kids once played with sidewalk chalk, the stoop where I sat alone so many nights wondering what went wrong. And then I turned and walked to my car. No tears, no guilt, just clean air in my lungs and an open road in front of me. They didn't follow. Back at my new cottage, the sun was beginning to dip behind the trees. I set the quilt down on my reading chair, unpacked the dishes I actually used, and brewed a fresh cup of peppermint tea. For the first time in years, there was no one slamming cabinets, no passive-aggressive sighs, no backhanded comments about my slipping memory. Just birdsong, peace. A house that breathed with me instead of around me. I lit a candle, sat down, and smiled, because I hadn't just sold a house. I had reclaimed my home. It had been 2 weeks since the closing. The move was finished. My new place in Black Mountain felt like a quiet breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. The cottage was small, just 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for company I didn't expect to have often. The air smelled like pine and something clean, unbothered. I was planting herbs on the back porch when I heard tires on gravel. I knew that sound. Greg's truck. I stood slowly, brushed the dirt from my hands, and waited as he and Rachel stepped out. She looked overdressed again, heels sinking into the soft ground, jacket too tailored for real conversation. Greg looked tired. He hadn't aged gracefully under stress. Neither of them smiled. "Can we come in?" Rachel asked stiffly. I opened the door without a word. Not because I owed them that kindness, but because I wanted them to see. The place was spotless, my books on the shelf, framed photos of Jack and the kids when they were actually children. No clutter. No tension. Just me. They stood awkwardly near the entryway, unsure if they should sit. "I made lemon cake," I said, nodding toward the kitchen counter. "It's still warm." Rachel blinked, confused by the hospitality. Greg didn't say a word. Finally, Rachel exhaled. "Look, we came to apologize." I sat, didn't invite them to join me, just waited. "We messed up," she continued. "We were wrong to make assumptions about the house, about you. I think we forgot who you were." I didn't respond. Greg finally spoke. "You didn't have to go that far, Mom." "Yes, I did," I said plainly, "because subtle never worked with either of you." Silence. Rachel lowered her gaze. "We thought we were planning for your future, but we never asked what you wanted." "And you didn't think I'd say no," I added. Greg's lips tightened. "It's just hard, seeing what we lost." I looked at him carefully. "You didn't lose a house. You lost access. That's not the same." That landed. Hard. Rachel walked over and picked up a photo frame. It was of all of us, from years ago, before the cracks. At a 4th of July barbecue in the backyard. Jack was holding the camera. We were all sunburned and smiling. "I miss this," she said. "So do I answered. "But I won't beg for it anymore." Rachel set the photo down gently. "Do you want us in your life?" I thought about that for a long moment. The air in the room held its breath. "I want people in my life who see me as more than a stepping stone," I said. "If that's who you want to be, the door's open. But if you came here to convince me I was wrong to protect myself, then we're done." Greg shifted uncomfortably. "You're serious. Dead serious." He looked around the room, again, as if trying to make sense of this version of me, the one he never expected to stand her ground. "Then I guess we'll go," he said after a pause. I nodded. "You take care." Rachel lingered at the door, eyes glossy. "I'll call," she said quietly. "Only if it's honest," I replied, and then they left. The gravel crunched under their tires. The birds kept chirping. Nothing in the world collapsed. I sat back down on the porch. The rosemary I had just planted caught a breeze and brushed my arm like a whisper. I was still standing, still whole, and finally, at peace. Some mornings, I wake up before the birds. I sit in my sunlit kitchen, hands curled around a warm mug, and breathe in silence like it's holy. I used to dread mornings. Another day of being ignored, dismissed, stepped over. Now, they feel like pages I get to write, clean, undisturbed. This new place isn't big. It doesn't have granite countertops or a finished basement, but it has me. And that's more than I've had in years. I've started doing things I forgot I loved. Sketching again. I enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center. I even joined a little book club with 3 other women around my age who meet at the bakery every Tuesday. No one there sees me as background noise. Last week, a young woman at the garden store called me Miss Ellie and asked how I kept my marigolds so bright. I laughed, told her the secret was talking to them like they matter. I think she knew. I wasn't just talking about flowers. There's a strange power in claiming your name again. For years, I was just Mom or Grandma or her, said with a sigh. Now when I say Ellie McBride, I remember that I once stood in front of a classroom full of teenagers and taught them how to argue, how to write, how to think. I remember that I planned a funeral by myself, kept a house standing on one income, paid off debts without help, and still had enough love left to give my children every ounce of comfort I could. And still, they called me in the way. But here's what I've learned. When people stop seeing your value, it's not your job to prove it again and again. It's your job to walk away with it. My name is on fewer documents now, no house deed, no joint accounts. But it's more mine than ever. Greg and Rachel text from time to time. The messages come slower, softer. I respond when I feel like it. There's no venom in me anymore, just boundaries and peace. I kept one framed photo from the old house, the one of Jack and me, sitting on the porch with our coffee. He's laughing, and I'm looking at him like, I can't believe I got that lucky. Sometimes I wonder what he'd say about all this, about the sale, the move, the kids. But then, remember, Jack knew me best. He'd say, "Took you long enough, Elle." And I'd nod. The house may be gone, the children may be grown, but what I've built now, at 68, with silver in my hair and steadiness in my heart, is something nobody can steal. A life that belongs to me. And when I go, it won't be a house I leave behind. It'll be this truth. Never let someone else's entitlement shrink your worth, because you're not in their way. You're just ahead of them. And that is where I plan to stay.